Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. I am Daryl Grove. I am not in studio today. I'm at my home office, but there is a Total Soccer Show because Bruce Arena dropped the US men's national team roster with 27 names on it ahead of the friendly against Venezuela, the World Cup qualifiers against Trinidad and Mexico. I figured I should call up Taylor Rockwell, my co-host, get him on the phone and talk about that roster. So today's episode won't have the crisp, clear audio that you've come to expect from TSS Towers, but it will have Taylor Rockwell on his cell phone in a garden. Because sometimes that's good too. Okay, let's call him up.
Yellow.
Taylor Rockwell.
Hey, Daryl Grove.
How you doing?
Good. How you doing, buddy?
I'm calling you up for a semi-emergency TSS podcast. And first of all, I want to really apologise for pulling you away from a Memorial Day gathering with your in-laws. I'm sure you must be devastated to have to leave the party.
I mean, I would say that I am devastated, but they don't listen to the podcast. So yeah, no, it's welcome. We're good. We're good.
Are you hiding out somewhere?
I don't know what you're possibly referring to. I might be underneath the back porch. Yeah.
Under the back porch.
No, it's good.
It's for the acoustics, right? There's no echo under the back porch.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I've installed all the sound dampening equipment. So yeah, that's exactly it.
So the reason we're doing this in what should be really a day off is that Bruce Arena went and dropped the roster on Memorial Day Sunday because he is no friend of the podcaster who wants a long weekend off.
It's either that or he himself wants the Monday off, so he doesn't have to want to think about it anymore. So he drops it, then he goes on his vacation and leaves the media to have to scramble and talk about it.
Actually, I know that's not true because I know the players are they've gathered in Denver today. Practice starts today.
Yep.
How about that for commitment from the U.S. national team players?
I mean, it's especially committed for players who finished their season a week ago or fewer, and now here they are getting ready to play, or players who are in mid-season, as many of them are.
Absolutely. And just to give everybody the background, there's going to be a friendly this coming Saturday against Venezuela. I believe that's going to be in Utah. Then there's the World Cup qualifier against Trinidad and Tobago at home in Denver, and then there's that trip to the Azteca away to Mexico World Cup qualifier. So this is an important roster. And when I saw it, I kind of just went yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, you could make a couple arguments if you really wanted to. I know some people will be frustrated there's no Sasha Kleshton, some will be frustrated there's no Benny Feilhaber. But I mean, yeah, overall, I think it's about as strong of a roster as you can name. And I think it speaks to the depth of the squad and also what maybe Bruce Arena is going to be trying to do in these two games. And
part of the reason it's strong is that there are 27 people on it. Let's not forget that. So I feel like that's partly because there are 3 games, partly because they're going to be increasing altitude, right? There's the Rio Tinto is at altitude, then Denver's higher altitude, then Azteca is up in the clouds. It's the Cloud Atlas game.
Indeed. And then on top of that, from what I've read, Mexico, I guess, have to kind of shove it all into an abbreviated time frame because they then head out for the Confederation Cup.
Yeah.
So I think with that in mind, that's why they're playing a game earlier, which, again, is why I think Bruce Arena has included more names than he needs to.
Yeah, so just so everybody knows the process, you can only name 23 to your match day roster, but you can, ask as many guys as you want to come and practice, right? He could have asked 50 US players to come to practice if he wants, and then he can name players for the game day.
And so you had, speaking of that, you had texted me, roster's announced. So I Googled it, and if you Google it, if you do U.S. soccer roster, one of the first things you'll get is an announcement that they've named a bunch of players to the academy pool, which is 60 players. And so the first thing I saw was U.S. named 60 players, and I was like, what now? I thought it was a joke for a minute. Then it all came together. But yeah, for just a half second, I was like, all right, Bruce, do what you do, man.
Would you want to start with the obvious omissions then? You mentioned Sasha Kleshton and Benny Feilhaber. On a scale of 1 to 10, how surprised are you that they weren't there?
I mean, I think I'm only surprised in the sense that they seem to be more Bruce Arena's types of players, his guys.
Yeah, than Jurgen Klinsmann's, for example.
Yeah, if it had been another manager, I wouldn't be surprised at all. And really, I mean, I think there will be some people out there who are very frustrated. I think there will be some people out there who act as though they're frustrated because you got to have a hot take. Generally, I wasn't that
You're a bad man.
disappointed, and I think especially because it points to the attacking players that he wants to use and how he wants to use them.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at is he did play Christian Pulisic as a central attacking midfielder in that game against Honduras, and it 100% worked because we won 6-0. Bruce Arena has also talked about Daryl&nbsp as a possible central attacking midfielder, and then that's if you go with two strikers, right? If you only go with one striker, then the guy underneath the striker in the attacking midfield spot is most likely Clint Dempsey. So you've already got like three guys who can play in that spot. Bedoya could also play there, so suddenly it's almost like, and I feel like Kljestan and Farhaber, they're such playmakery guys that you either you either make them central or you just let them stay with their teams, right?
Yeah, I think so, and I think maybe that's also part of it. And the other aspect of it is that they are domestic-based players, so if you do have somebody get injured in the first couple of days of camp, maybe they do get called in a little bit later. I'm not quite sure how that works in terms of what Bruce Arena wants to do in solidifying his roster, but you could see them added, although I think he's probably going to try to stick with the players he has there just because he can kind of build that chemistry in these next couple of days.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. Okay, so can we talk about who we're excited to see?
Well, the only other thing that probably is worth thing that's probably worth noting before we get to it is other omissions would be Sebastian Lletget and Jermaine Jones, obviously not included due to varying degrees of injury. Sebastian Lletget's obviously worse than Jermaine Jones, but that's why they're not there. I know that he will get, if he does a Facebook Live, I know he'll get a question about, like, are you mad at Jermaine Jones? Why didn't you include him? But the answer is he's been injured. That's why he's not there.
And don't you think Jermaine Jones's injury kind of solves what would have been a headache, maybe for Arena, but definitely for, like, fans picking their preferred 11, for podcasters trying to figure out an 11? Because it's still, like, it would still be a bold move to not start Jermaine Jones. But at the same time, we the evidence of the last, of maybe the Panama game was, maybe Bradley and Acosta is a better pairing, or Bradley and Bedoya. It just seems like the Bradley Jones thing, we're kind of convinced it's not the way to go, right? So now we don't have to think about that because Jones isn't there.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's especially not the way to go for these next two games, and I think it definitely buys Bruce Arena time to let Kurt Arnolfo have to figure out what you're going to do with Jermaine Jones. They weren't looking that good. They've looked better since he's been gone, so maybe Arnolfo figures some stuff out, and then if he can't, then it gives Arena the justification of, oh, he's not really playing that much at club level, he's not playing well at club level, so we'll see what else is out there. And then if he gets him playing well, then it justifies his inclusion. So I think either way, Bruce Arena is fairly happy that Jermaine Jones got that injury. Okay,
so if we're sticking with omissions, I'm going to say maybe Giassi Zardes, because I know that he's a Bruce Arena guy. And it's I remember Arena saying, okay, he's not going to be one of the forwards because we've got Altidore, Dempsey, Morris, Wood, right? We're kind of set at forward, right? And there's Josh Sargent bubbling up underneath. We'll maybe talk about him later today.
Yep.
But then he's got his wide guys, right? He's got Johnson and Pulisic and Nagbe and Areola in the squad. So it seems like there just isn't a spot for Giassi Zardes in at least the top 27.
Yeah, and I think, again, to your earlier point, that maybe that speaks to, I'm not necessarily going to be able to get you minutes, and then in order for me to call you in, I'm taking you away from your club team, so maybe it makes more sense for you to stay with your club, continue to perform well. If you do well, then Gold Cup is more of an option, and I think that is probably the case for the players that we've talked about already, Kljestan, Feilhaber, maybe Dax McCarty, maybe Giassi Zardes, and obviously a number of other gentlemen. I would say 19 off the top of my head since I listed 4. They probably have Gold Cup this summer to look forward to.
Oh, Dax McCarty made this roster.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah. Then there's just those 3. Just those 3.
Yeah, Dax seems to me he's in there as the Michael Bradley backup or possible partner, depending on how things shake out. All right, I want to stick with omissions then. Eric Lehigh is the other one that people were maybe hoping to see, and instead you've got Graham Zusi listed as a fullback and the unkillable DeMarcus Beasley on this roster again.
Yeah, which I got to say, though, like, I really don't know what to make of that, because I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, he's got his preferred fullbacks, like, fit and ready to go, whereas he didn't last time. Those would be DeAndre Yedlin, and I've seen some people implying that it's going to be Fabian Johnson. But I'm surprised.
No, I think Jorge Villafana looks like the likely starter at left back to me.
So that's what I'm saying, is because, again, we've talked about it many times, but we haven't really seen Fabian Johnson that much recently. But that he basically said, I'll play wherever you want me to, but that's where I want to stay. Don't play me at fullback in one game, play me at attacking mid in one other game. So I was surprised to see some people saying, oh, he's got his ideal fullback, because I don't think he does in the sense that it's Fabian Johnson. I think he does in the sense that it's Jorge Villafana.
Yeah, and then I'd say Yedlin on the other side. And my guess is that those are his starters, and maybe Fabian Johnson's in there somewhere in his mind, like thinking about it. Just if I have to, if I need a super attacking fullback, maybe I do that.
Agreed.
But then my guess is that Graham Zusi, who I'm not thrilled about as a right back, and DeMarcus Beasley, who obviously has some limitations just given his age. They're more there as dependable backups, whereas Eric Lehigh, like Bruce Arena, as I understand it, has never ever worked with him. So it would be a big gamble to call him in for a World Cup qualifying squad, right? Where at least with DMB, Bruce has like a decade and more of history, and Graham Zusi, he's obviously worked with him at least in January and has seen plenty of him. So I think it's a case of just guys you trust to be the backups.
Yeah, and again, I really do think it's worth reiterating one more time that, I mean, basically Bruce Arena said straight up that we're going to have changes between the Trinidad game and the Mexico game, and then we're going to have new players called in for the Gold Cup. So it seems like his goal is to give as many people as possible a summer off, especially those guys coming from Europe who've had a whole year. Now they're playing these, then maybe you give them a couple months off. So I think people who are upset about Lehigh or Kleshton or Failhaber, not McCarty, just expect to see those players at the Gold Cup. So don't be too bummed that Lehigh's not here, because this isn't the time to really experiment with unknowns, at least when it comes to Arena's perception of unknown.
Yeah, July Gold Cup is time to experiment. June World Cup qualifiers, that's the time for the tried and true. I think that goes for goalkeeper as well, right? There's 4 keepers named: Gazan, Howard, and Ethan Horvath, and Nick Romando. And I feel like even that's it's kind of a fudge, right? Like, because he doesn't know Horvath that well, but it's obviously you want to get him in there. But Romando's there just in case as well.
Yeah, one of those names is not like the other. And I think I was thinking about this before you called, that if I were to guess like the top 5 names that you, Daryl, are most excited to see on that roster, I probably would have put Ethan Horvath on there. Yeah. Because we've been excited by the move to Belgium. It seems like he started to get some looks and maybe will be the starting option next season. So a youngster starting in Europe at goalkeeper at a time when the goalkeeper position for the U.S. is a little bit down or very down, depending on your opinion. I was pretty happy to see him, but I do think that he's probably one that is break glass in case of emergency sort of player.
Right, yeah. And then for the Gold Cup, you could have Horvath and Bill Hamid and maybe Dave Bingham again. You could really get some less experienced keepers in there. I think in the meantime, Tim Howard will be teaching Ethan Horvath to look behind you before you put the ball down.
Yeah, and actually, you know
what I'm talking about, right?
I agree with that. I'm also curious to see if you get other players who are maybe not MLS players who maybe have kind of been on the outside looking in, like, we haven't said his name in a long time, William Yarbrough. It'd be interesting to see if he gets a Gold Cup call-up, just because it won't be disrupting his season, as far as I understand it, to be there.
All right, so let's talk about who is on the roster then. I also see Timmy Chandler listed at fullback. I see Tim Ream, and I see Matt Hedges. I would argue that's the most experimental name on this roster is Matt Hedges. No World Cup qualifying experience.
No, but from what I've read and from what I've heard from Arena, not me personally, but from what I've read of Arena,
just you and Bruce,
it sounds like it's yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's actually here. He's at the family barbecue. It's weird. You wouldn't expect that, given that they're in training camp. From what I've heard, it's basically that Hedges had to leave the January camp early due to injury. So this is Arena's way of saying, like, hey, you're still in the plans, you're still in consideration. Come in and we'll see what you can do. But it sounds like maybe he's got those 4 names of the 27 who maybe are in there just in case, but maybe we look at you in the Gold Cup instead.
And Hedges is one of those, right?
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. All right, let's talk about what happens going forward then, because you mentioned a thing that Bruce Arena said, which is that the team will definitely change from the Trinidad qualifier to the Mexico qualifier. And I want to, what's the word? Posit, maybe, that we might see something similar to what happened with Honduras at home and then Panama away. Which was, at home to Honduras, we had 2 strikers start the game with an attacking midfielder, Christian Pulisic, underneath, 2 attacking guys wide of him. I think it was Nagbe and Leggett, and then just Michael Bradley as the lone defensive midfielder. Then when we went away to Panama, it was more like a 2-man defensive midfield with Bradley and Jones to start, and then just the 1 striker with Dempsey underneath. So essentially just more forwards against Honduras, fewer forwards against Panama. I think maybe we see more forwards against Trinidad, Pulisic in a central role, and maybe fewer forwards away to Mexico and Pulisic back out wide.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. The other wrinkle in there, and I don't know if you want to get to this yet, is yellow cards. Have you looked at that? Yet?
The list I see of players 1 yellow card away from a suspension are Jeff Cameron, John Brooks, Josmir Volmi-Altidore, Michael Bradley, and Matt Beasler. So the first 4, I think, are sort of very likely starters. So are you wondering the same thing as me, which is, do any of those guys, maybe Cameron, Brooks, Altidore, Bradley, not even start against Trinidad because maybe we think we can get away with it?
Well, that's
to not risk a yellow card.
Essentially, yeah, exactly. My question is, like, points-wise, I know the answer to this. Is it better to get 3 points at Trinidad and then maybe get 2 players suspended, have a weaker squad, and lose to Mexico, so you come away from 2 games with 3 points? Or is it better for morale purposes to play like a semi-weekend squad against Trinidad, get a draw there, go to the Azteca and get a draw there? It's 2 points versus 3 points, but you've gotten a draw at the Azteca. Like, it's a tough decision, but I think I would rather see Bruce Arena go practical. I'd rather go head over heart in this situation, and I'd rather see the strongest possible lineup in whatever formation against Trinidad to make sure you get those points. And then if you get something against Mexico, you do, but since historically they don't, then I'm okay with it.
So you're thinking the classic, take it one game at a time. Like, don't worry about Mexico now. Yeah. Like, just put your strongest guys on the field against Trinidad, go for the 3 points. And then here's the little wrinkle I would add to that. Then maybe, and I want to give Trinidad more respect than we have so far, right? Because, they could always upset us. But maybe if you're 2-0 up with 20 minutes to go and Michael Bradley hasn't gotten a yellow card and there's another game in 4 days' time at the Azteca at altitude, you kind of think, hey, Mikey, come take a rest.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and yeah, we know Trinidad are capable of getting points. We know they've got talented players. We know that we've got problematic players in the form of Kenwin Jones. Kevin Molino obviously can cause problems both at club level and for the national team. So, and they're tricky players as well. So that's where my hesitation comes in, because I could easily see Jeff Cameron or John Brooks or both be a little bit too aggressive on Kenwin Jones, trying to make sure that they kind of stamp their authority down, they get that booking, and then they're suspended. So again, I went with maybe you start Jeff Cameron and then somebody else, and then just in case Jeff Cameron gets a yellow, you can still play John Brooks. Because I think the nightmare scenario is you start both, they both get yellows, they're both suspended against Mexico. But I think...
But we've still got endless centre-backs to throw at this, right? We've still then got Omar Gonzalez and Matt Beasley and Tim Ream and Matt Hedges. Yep. We've got enough centre-backs to stack on top of each other and reach to the moon.
That's true. So let me ask you this then, because maybe you have a different perspective than I do. Honestly speaking, if I asked you who were the USA's top 2 centre-backs, would you say Jeff Cameron and John Brooks?
Yes.
Are they clearing away for you? Because they are for me.
Yeah, with Omar Gonzalez, I think, really close in behind. But yeah, Cameron and Brooks as my starting 2. Yeah, definitely. Especially when all the fullbacks are available, so then we don't have to consider the idea of Jeff Cameron at right back.
You know what? I think I've talked myself out of this. I think I'd rather have Omar Gonzalez starting against Trinidad.
Oh, really?
On the off chance, only because on the off chance that he then is starting in the Azteca, we know he's a defender who can have those moments of what are you doing? And I could see him trying to prove too much in Mexico where he plays at club level. That would just make me a little bit nervous that he might be a little bit too up for it. So I don't want to see him against Mexico.
I'd argue the other way, that he's going to be more comfortable in Mexico than anyone. From past World Cup qualifying experience, I believe he was part of that team that went and got the draw at the Azteca, the first ever World Cup qualifying tie at the Azteca.
I call that the oxygen mask game.
Yeah. But just then the experience of always being in Mexico, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Gonzalez held out of the first game and starting in Mexico.
Ooh, all right. Well,
so maybe Cameron and Brooks are told to start against Trinidad, and they're just hey, if you get a yellow card, don't worry about it. If you have to knock Kenwin Jones over or slide tackle Levi Garcia, just don't worry about it. We've got Omar waiting.
I kind of hope that that's not the briefing. I was like, do you get a card, you get a card. I hope
it won't
it's more
be,
maybe about tactics then. All right, well then you've made me a little bit less nervous about the card situation. Thank you for that, Daryl.
All right, so obviously we'll get into this more as the games get a little closer. Although, TSS warning, I'm going to be sort of out of town to go visit my family, so there may be some TSS guest hosts stepping in. So you'll be getting I think it might be good. We'll be getting some different perspectives on these US games coming up.
Yeah, I think that's the plan. We'll maybe have some Matt Doyles, some Will Parchmans on, and then I'm sure I'll have to find some English accent to try to replace you.
You just get other people to fake it.
I mean, yeah, but you've heard mine, and we're not going to go into that. So it can be a risky proposition when someone says they can do a British accent. That doesn't mean they can actually do it or should do it.
And just looking more short term, the friendly against Venezuela. Who do you think that's a more experimental lineup, or do we see sort of a version of what we're going to see against Trinidad and or Mexico?
My guess, this isn't a very helpful answer, but my guess is that we see an experimental lineup from Bruce Arena's perspective. So that might be, that might be this guy has played really well in training. so let's give him a start. But that might not be a surprise name. Like, that might be Omar Gonzalez gets the start because he's come into camp and looked really, really sharp.
Yeah.
And so that might be Bruce Arena, like, oh, well, maybe I'll see what he does there. Maybe I'll try this guy there. Maybe Bobby Wood will start, but he'll be a little bit in behind Josie Alto, and we'll see how that system works. So, like, I don't think it will be famous last words as he starts all, like, unproven players. But I don't think it will be completely experimental, but I bet we see just a little bit of kind of shifting people around and trying a couple different things as, like, a plan B or plan C against those opponents in World Cup qualifying.
It occurred to me while you were talking that there are some major players that Arena has not worked with because they weren't available for January, and then they were, like, injured for March. And I think it's Yedlin, Fabian Johnson, and Bobby Wood. So maybe those guys, you can almost, I want to say I can almost guarantee they will play some role, possibly start against Venezuela, just because Arena will want to have some, like, match experience with those guys.
Thank you for that, because that's you clearly you can read my mind and know what I'm trying to say. That's what I mean, is that for Arena, it's probably like, I know what these guys are going to give me, these MLS guys, these guys I've worked with before, so I could rely on them to get the result and feel safe, but I need to try these guys. And it's not as though Bruce Arena has no managerial experience, don't get me wrong. But you can see him being like, oh, should I play it safe and get the result and build confidence, or should I just make sure that this guy plays the way I think he'll play in a big game?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, yeah. And then he'll probably just learn a little bit that helps him through to the qualifiers.
Yeah, ideally.
All right, before I send you back into the party with your in-laws, we've got to talk some U-20s as well, because this past, I actually can't remember when the game was, a couple of days ago. Was it Sunday morning? The US under-20s played their final group stage game against Saudi Arabia. It finished 1-1, a goal from Brooks Lennon, and lots of yellow cards. Yeah,
so we've put ourselves in a position where we topped the group. Hooray. We were playing New Zealand in the next round. I guess that's good, but US is doing so without a number of players, which is not good. I'm going to chalk that up as a negative in the plus minus column.
So I don't know. Have you seen this game?
No, I've seen like bits and pieces, as in like I've seen like a couple different highlights packages, but not enough to say with any sort of narrative authority what happened in this one. Okay,
so I went back and I looked at the yellow cards, the controversial yellow cards. Here's what's happened. The right back, Aaron Herrera, is suspended for a yellow card. Derek Jones, defensive midfielder, suspended for an extra yellow card. They've accumulated too many yellow cards. And Cameron Carter-Vickers got 2 yellow cards and was sent off. So he is suspended. We have the round of 16 game against New Zealand under-20s on Thursday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern. It's going to be on Fox Sports 1. We will be without Cameron Carter-Vickers, Aaron Herrera, and Derek Jones. 3 pieces of the sort of defensive setup will be missing.
Yep. And I think of those 3, surprisingly, I think the biggest loss is Derek Jones. That's the one that I think is going to be the hardest for the U.S. to deal with overall.
Yeah, I'd agree, because we have a lot of centre-backs who can plug that gap for Cameron Carter-Vickers. We don't have another Derek Jones, and he's been so important in terms of breaking up attacks and then restarting and starting U.S. attacks.
Unless we forget, he was the replacement for Getty and Zalem, who got injured in the first game, went out, tore his ACL, it turns out. So it's like we're looking for a backup to the backup. And that's kind of always a harder spot to fill than, one of our center backs might be injured, might be suspended. So we brought a number of different center backs. CCV obviously didn't start the first game. That would have been Tommy Redding. So maybe he comes back in. Again, that doesn't fill me with confidence given the way he played that first game against Ecuador. But I think Derek Jones is going to be much harder to deal with, or his absence, that is.
So my guess is that Tommy Redding comes in at right back and Justin Glad comes in at centre back, and then Eric Palmer-Brown stays in the back, and then the defensive midfielder probably is going to be maybe one of the guys we've already seen. It might be the time that Tyler Adams comes back and actually plays defensive midfielder, which is where we always thought he should be playing. But the situation is, I've done a 180 on this. I used to be all about Tyler Adams should be sort of at the base of the midfield. He was once again involved in creating the US goal. He's turned into an absolute creative force in that sort of advanced number 8 role. So I'm going to assume you haven't seen the goal, Taylor, or at least have only seen it once or twice.
Exactly.
It's another situation where Tyler Adams draws lots and lots of defenders towards him. They like 3 or 4 defenders crowd Tyler Adams. He lifts it over the top of all of them and puts it into the path of Josh Sargent. He essentially creates all that space for Sargent. Sargent squares it to De La Torre. De La Torre's shot is saved. Brooks Lennon is there on the rebound. But once again, it all starts with a bit of clever creativity from Tyler Adams. But I'm now arguing that we should kind of sacrifice that and move him back to the number 6 role for the game against New Zealand.
And is that because of what he offers you both like defensively and offensively, or is that because you think that there are more capable options in terms of replacing him in the attack, or some combination of the two?
I don't think anyone can directly replace what he does in attack, but I think he's the only one that can offer the sort of tenacity and like, you know, smart ball winning and then distribution at number 6 at that defensive midfielder. I think he's the only guy that can do it. So we then have to just lose what he gives us in the attack just to make sure we have that solid base to build from.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So I appreciate that you've kind of calmed my jangled nerves a little bit, because I was pretty nervous about the suspensions and the problems that could arise as a result.
It's still not good, but but I think the US, this under-20 team, has the depth to deal with it. I would say you're going to hear from people that these yellow cards were kind of a joke, and they are mostly right. They are mostly right.
Really?
Yeah, it was a Peruvian referee, I believe. I don't know. Like, Aaron Herrera's was a yellow card. He did that thing where... So he's the right back, right? So he did this thing where he pushed the ball ahead of him too far, tried to chase it, then lunged after it.
Oh, yeah.
And clattered into a guy. That's a yellow, right?
Yep.
Both of Cameron Carter-Vickers' yellow cards were just for putting his hand on the shoulder of an opposition player. Like, not even like physically yanking him back, just touching him on the shoulder.
See, now you're sending me back into this barbecue with anger on my mind. That's
I'm sorry.
But yeah, I guess what I'll have to do is maybe I'll have to watch the highlights themselves, or maybe I'll watch the full match before we record tomorrow, and then I can come in nice and angry for recording that show.
We should also, maybe we should take a little look at New Zealand's U20s just to see what we're up against, because this is the full New Zealand team. We didn't manage to beat them when we played them in a friendly.
No, yeah, exactly. So let's take it a game at a time. And I think also we have had some people wanting us to kind of step up our coverage of the U-20 World Cup. And so I think that's probably something that we will aim to do now that we're into the knockout rounds a little bit more, maybe a little bit more preview review.
Yeah.
In as much as we can before Daryl flees to foreign shores.
Also, tomorrow we're going to look at the FA Cup. We're going to look at the DFB Pokal, where Christian Pulisic was involved in Dortmund winning it. Spoiler alert. What else? Oh, today we saw Huddersfield Town win on penalty kicks in the playoff final. Congratulations to Huddersfield Town, and especially to our friend Pavlos, Huddersfield Town fan. He's really made me root for Huddersfield in the playoffs this time.
He did, and like as sad as it is, because Danny Williams is with Reading, and they're the ones who lost that penalty shootout. I think overall it is the result I would have wanted, because obviously our friend Pav is a huge Huddersfield fan, so you want that. Then you still it comes down to like David Wagner. No, he goes by Wagner. It has been confirmed.
Okay, good to know.
It is not Wagner. He has like the 8 caps for the USA, so I think of him as an American coach. But then Danny Williams with Reading, and so I think in the end it was as good of a result in that perspective, because you've got David Wagner now in the Premier League. Danny Williams, ice in his veins, made his penalty in the penalty shootout. So at least there's that. And then I think maybe he can console himself with I'm assuming, call up to the Gold Cup this summer.
Oh, maybe. He was in tears at the end of this game. I was actually, I didn't watch this game too closely, but I was really impressed with what I saw from Danny Williams. He did a lot of proper defensive midfield work, right? Just winning the ball and distributing it.
Yeah. And from everything I've heard of his season, and from the couple little rumors, I would not be surprised even if Reading are not in the Premier League, Danny Williams is.
Oh, that gets picked up.
Yeah. Yeah, just because I think he's been very solid for Reading. I think a couple different clubs have been impressed by him. And obviously that includes the 3 championship clubs who've gone up and are obviously going to need to strengthen.
So we'll know more when we see the Gold Cup roster. If Danny Williams isn't on that roster, we'll know where he stands with Bruce Arena.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. My final thought on the playoff, I think it was very unfair that Huddersfield had Professor X using his mind powers to make Reading players miss penalties.
Man, is that guy ever not the best? Yeah, Patrick Stewart there is a Huddersfield fan. But I just love that even in the penalty shootout, everyone else is just clawing their eyes out and crying and screaming. And he just looks as poised, and he just looks exactly the way you would expect Patrick Stewart to look at all times. Is he Sir Patrick Stewart? Because if not, he should be.
I'm pretty sure he is, yeah.
Pretty sure he is, and I'm pretty sure he should be.
If not, he is on the Total Soccer Show.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure that will mean just as much to him.
All right, Taylor, thank you for taking the time to talk to me from under the deck today.
Yeah, well, I've paced since then. I probably walked about a half a mile back and forth in the yard. So my pleasure.
All right, Taylor, I will see you in studio tomorrow for some more Total Soccer Show chat.
All right, buddy. Sounds good. Speak to you then.